I'd like to introduce Jim Morris. Jim is founder and the principal at Product Discovery Group. And we've invited him today as an expert in product discovery to spend some time telling us about, the product discovery process, the skills, the discipline, and the practice. It is a very important skill to have somewhere in a product management team that ideally informs and drives some of the product design as well as different directions and the product roadmap as a whole. So with that, I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Jim, but if you wanted to share your screen and kick things off, we're good to go.
Sure, thank you. I'll do a little bit of my intro and then I'll share. First, I just want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day. I know this is the evening for a lot of us, all of us, and so yeah, thank you. I love attending these meetups. It is a little bit easier attending them from home, though you do not get that personal connection. And I see some familiar faces and some familiar names, so good to see you all. So I love working with folks on product discovery. It's one of the things that I do. And tonight, I hope to give you some actionable tips and ideas, really to make product discovery easier to do, faster to do, make it so that you can get more out of it. And then basically that helps you do it more often. I find product discovery to be one of those things that people wish they did more. So let me share here. Okay. All right. And then good. Thank you, Jim. I was hoping someone would give me a thumbs up. They could see it. Great. And I met Jim at another meetup a while back. I had the chance to sit next to him. So I know Jim's going to ask me a good question later. That's what I remember from meeting him. Not shy. Okay. Great. So this is me in college. I'm a computer science major. And so I started as an engineer and really got lucky to join the internet in its infancy at a company called fogdog.com. And we sold sporting goods back when this company called Amazon only sold books. It was a lot of fun. We had a great ride. We went public in 1999, shortly before the crash of 2000. Very interesting time. We made everything from scratch. And as a business-minded engineer, I just fell into that role of a product manager even before that title existed. So I've always loved figuring out the business side and the technical side. So I identified with a couple of folks who had that similar transition. They were talking about in the intros. Then I went on and started a company called Power Reviews with a couple of folks from Fogdog. And we knew that product reviews were changing the online retail landscape. We saw it at Amazon, we implemented them at Fogdog. So we democratized that feature to online retail. We grew to about 1,200 clients over about 7 years. And then we got bought by our competitor, a company called Bazaar Voice based in Texas. I worked with them for a couple of years, and then the federal government decided we were a monopoly and they actually split us apart. And so I left that company and went with the new Power Reviews, which happened to be based in Chicago, and did that for a little bit. And then got a little burned out on startups after 16 years of that and 19 years in online retail, and started my own company to help companies help my clients, help product teams be better at product management and really get into product discovery as a way to send better ideas and better concepts to engineering. So engineers have solved a lot of their problems by doing things quicker and smaller chunks, otherwise known as agile. On the idea side, we're still kind of catching up in product management. So we're still looking for that unifying theory. And I think product discovery is one of those concepts that can really help product folks add the process and the reliability that agile has brought to engineers. So with that, I want to hear from everybody out there. What is your experience with product discovery? This is going to help me as I go through the presentation. So Tom, will you throw up the poll, please? Awesome.
Yep, there we go with the poll. I won't hum the Jeopardy theme song, but if you take a moment find the polling window, you can click on your answer and get some feedback on with the rest of the audience where you rank on product discovery. And we've got about just coming up on half of you have voted so far. And a little bit more time. Got some folks coming in a little bit. Let's see, we're at coming up on 70%. If you haven't found the chat or the polling window, it should be somewhere on one of your screens or windows. And I think we're up to 80%. That's probably as far as we're going to get here. I'm going to end the poll and share the results out here. So you can see the 51% of the people have done product discovery once or twice before. We got 16% and are managing teams that do discovery. 16% have colleagues that do product discovery. 16% were not familiar with the term product discovery. We've got 11% doing it monthly, 7% doing it weekly.
Great. Yeah, the once or twice before is that energy you get. We're like, oh, this is great. I'm going to really motivate to do it. And then perhaps it took a long time and it was a lot of work to recruit users and find folks. So hopefully I can break down product discovery into these chunks that are manageable, that'll make you get back into it. And I loved seeing that nobody's employer prevented them from doing discovery. So believe it or not, it does happen. So great. So again, the approach that I think you will actually use is to start with experiments. And I'm going to go through and kind of explain that approach. This is not a totally comprehensive approach for product discovery. I think John Carter was saying, yeah, there are different ways different companies do product discovery. So, but I think this is one that's genericized, that's generic. So let's go for it. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story. At one point in my career, my team inherited an analytics product, an advanced analytics product. And let's call it the review analyzer. I went to look up to see if it was still on the internet. Well, it turns out the documentation for it is public documentation. And so I grabbed this screenshot for everybody. This product had about a $2.5 million annual run rate, and my team had inherited it. And it was a great combination and use of big data. We as a company captured all the page views for the products on these sites. So we knew how often they were visited. And of course, we captured all the product reviews, so we knew the star rating. And the concept of this graph and a decent amount of the product was, hey, look, what if you have products that are sort of exceptional in some way? Like they have a low rating, but they're visited a lot. Well, maybe we want to take that off the site because we don't want people really visiting and getting a bad impression of our site or buying a product that's low rated. Or maybe it has a high rating, but no one's visiting it. And so we want to promote these highly rated, but flying under the radar type products. It's a great idea. And technologically, the product is very sound and pretty complicated to build. So we also had a notification system. So in the sense that maybe you weren't following each product, you could get notifications if they got a lot of products and a lot of reviews in a short amount of time, that kind of thing. And so to us, this was exciting. We want to let the computer do the work and get this advanced analytics. To the clients, it wasn't working. They weren't logging in. They weren't subscribing to notifications. And if they were, they weren't taking action. And so as a result, they weren't renewing. And in the subscription SaaS world, that 13-month is pretty important. And so there's a lot of pressure for us to preserve this $2.5 million in annual revenue. So my team went and educated ourselves on the history of this product's design and development. And we went and talked to the existing customers. And the first problem we found was there was really no customer feedback before development. And so what you have is this unhappy customer on screen. As it turns out, I think this dog is actually sort of looks unhappy all the time, even though it is probably happy, but it looked the part. And what I like to use discovery for is to not be surprised by customer reactions to our product. And so I think user testing could have predicted this lack of usage. It was also created in a vacuum, whether it's outer space or that vacuum that's on the screen. I couldn't pick which graphic I really liked, so I picked both. Focusing on outcomes over output can provide direction. We're supposed to increase revenue, we're supposed to pull bad products off a site. What is the vision of this product? It targeted the wrong customer. We've got this kind of quizzical look from this customer. We needed to find clients that cared about these insights. And the clients who owned the product for that $2.5 million of annual run rate, they actually weren't the clients that cared about these insights. We actually did have clients who cared, and the company eventually sort of found them. It was created primarily to be shown off at a client summit. So the time frame was rushed, and it was meant to be that flagship product that was shown, so it had to look good. And this got in the way of finding impactful insights. And so the pretty visuals won. And it did create some initial sales, but it did have that problem of not being renewed. This product also, like many products, was sold to somebody who was not the end user. When you are talking to procurement folks in that sales process and you sell it, if product is involved or product gets wind of these types of sales, you should know that there could be some risk in renewal. Because these products may not be top of mind, they may not get recurring usage, and the people who use it may not refer other folks internally or externally. So when you don't do discovery and you don't get a sense of who your customer is and how they'll use it, or you're talking to the wrong person, there are risks that you are accumulating. One thing that happens in business software quite a bit is that we bundle products. It's either to support deal pricing or to really reward customers for their longevity with us. But we want to temper the excitement of initial sales with this risk of non-renewal. Okay, and it required lots of data. So you had to have lots of data just to start with the product. And in the end, one of the big issues was that the insights were similar to those derived from sales. And I find this a lot in my history in e-commerce, is that sales ends up being kind of this winning metric, and that when we create advanced analytics, we want to create something that's insightful and differentiating from sales numbers. We want to double check that value. So the review analyzer was a technologically impressive product that worked correctly, but it didn't deliver that lasting value. So this is important lessons for us in product. So what I want to do is focus on the problems we encounter when we want to become customer-centric. We have this ignored customer. Hey, what about me? This is kind of what happened when you rush the deadlines. You also get people who haven't signed up yet. Maybe they're coming from a competitor. Maybe they really feel strongly about this particular feature that is right for their business. And for you as a product team, you have to decide, is it right for the platform? And you have to get your sales team, your executives on board with that. And the stubborn prospect in SaaS software is very similar to the customer up for renewal. If that is a large customer, they actually hold a lot of power. So if you're a SaaS company and you've got a customer that's got more than 5 or 10% of your revenue wrapped up in their contract, you don't have as much flexibility as you'd want to build features for the whole platform. And then you have vocal customers. These are often brought to you by your colleagues, or you find them and they'll talk your ear off. And it's up to you to make sure that these folks are aligned to your vision of the business. And if they are, these can be great lasting friendships where you co-develop products. And if they aren't, it's good to let everybody in the company know that this person is vocal, but they're not necessarily aligned. And so then it does culminate, the most common problem is this inward focus. So this is where I take my customer off the wall here. This is my customer prop. And we're just going to take the customer down for a little bit because we're too inwardly focused. We're talking to each other. On screen, I'll show you product manager. It looks like me with the ponytail. And I'm kind of going around the office back when that was all the rage, to go around the office and talk to your colleagues. And so I'm talking to everybody, and I'm getting their competing priorities. And then at some point, I just head for the door and I'm out of here. And the idea here is that when we're inwardly focused, we hear from some of our most passionate proponents of different parts of the product. The downside is, well, when we hear from them, we feel that these gathering requirements is safe. It feels comfortable. It feels collaborative. We're deferring to stakeholders. These stakeholders are sometimes our boss. They control our salary. Can be important to defer to them. But each of these internal stakeholders has their own agenda, competing priorities, and expects you to deliver what they want. And also, the more you talk to them, the more they expect you to deliver it. And when you get stuck in these gathering requirements from internal stakeholders and you get inwardly focused and you don't have your customer with you, as a product manager, the decisions are often made by the highest paid person in the office. So these decisions, when they make them, what I see is that CEO, sales, marketing, legal, customer support, what they hear from the customer is these kind of requests and demands that I want. And for the product team, we hear this kind of verbatim. Our job is to actually hit, is to get to I need. And I need is a process of applying techniques to get the problems, the opportunities that we can be successful at solving for our customers. So we want to go from I want to I need. And it's a pretty lonely job as a product manager. There really isn't a lot of folks with you. And I could probably genericize this to the product team, including a designer, discovery engineer, data analyst. There are definitely people who understand and are very customer-centric, but there are a lot of competing folks in companies. And so without that customer centricity, without that outside voice, it can be really hard. And so as you determine that customer need and match it to a business priority, it's not simple. And so what I want to do in this session is use these product discovery experiments, these ideas, these techniques as an efficient way to do this. So, so let's have some fun. We're thinking about experiments, okay? And everybody type something into the chat that you remember using in experiments, okay? So this, for us in America, this is going to be thinking back to high school, okay? Let's see. So physical items, rules, safety goggles. Okay, great. Tom, you started it. Fantastic. Prasad's got litmus paper. I love litmus paper. Magical stuff. Pete's got Bunsen burner. Yes. John Wang's got beakers and test tubes. Yes. Oh, the John Carter with the ball rolling down the incline. Yes. Physics. Yes. Not my favorite one. Pipettes, chemicals, test tubes, fire. Thanks, John. That's good. Yeah, earlier I talked to somebody who said smoke, so yes. Charging vessels, centrifuge. Ooh, that sounds like a great, Rich. I want to go to high school where you went. Blowing things up, yes. Burettes, flasks. Burette is Preeti. That's a deep reach, and I've got a burette to show you. So awesome. These are great, great concepts. Multimeters, double slit experiment. Oh yeah, light. I love light experiments. Firecrackers. This is a lot of fun. Good. We're getting out of the Zoom zoning out, right? Mila, we're doing something here. This is good. I wish I'd studied it more on what Mila did before I started today. So yeah, here's the generic lab thing. But we've got our stools, reagents, balances, filter paper. Great. Burettes, safety gear, like an eye wash facility. We have our awesome specimens that we never use. They just happen to be at the back of the room. This is kind of like all those Post-its that are on the wall from when you did discovery once or twice. I call it, what is it, agile wallpaper? Everyone's got that, right? And we have our scientist, our professor, our teacher with a microscope. Maybe we envisioned, maybe like a mouse maze. And then in reality, the most experiments we all did most recently, or not recently, but we've all done, is the Mentos in the 2-liter bottle of soda that just blows up. And there are lots of videos on this. If you haven't seen them recently, you should go back and see them. It'll bring you a little bit of joy. So, yeah. So I'll stay here. These are things that are great in like hardware experiments, chemistry experiments, biology experiments. Technology experiments are a lot more like psychology experiments. And this is something that I've learned on the job. This is a Rorschach ink blot. And what Rorschach, a psychologist, wanted to do was to get people to sort of tell him their inner thoughts and their inner needs and their inner desires through staring at something that was somewhat generic and kind of unknown. And so people could make it their own when they described what this was. And this actually is a great analogy to product discovery and technology experiments. So one of the things that are really generic to all experiments that work really well in our technology experiments, in addition to, is really this control group versus experimental group. You might see the sort of the matrix red pill, blue pill choice. With the vaccine trials, you're thinking, okay, there's a control group, which is the placebo, and you got this experimental group that's got this great new vaccine. The scientific method really applies. One of the things I love that you'll see in a little bit is changing one thing at a time so that you know what people are reacting to. I think we all want to be unbiased. We all bring our biases to what we do. And so being active in learning what your biases are and how they come out is super useful as someone who works with users. Part of it also is structuring a good experiment and not talking very much. I talk a lot, but when I do experiments, I'd let there be some awkward silences. We want to observe folks, maybe not this closely, but you get the idea. We want to be good listeners. And so the observations, the listening, in technology, we often are rewarded for our salesmanship in presentations, for convincing folks. And so sometimes you've got to turn that off when you're working with users to get the most out of it. And of course, the hypothesis concept. This is something that has gotten stronger and stronger as I've worked with clients over the last 5 years. People are so busy, they forget to write down what their goal is and what they think will happen before it happens, to put that line in the sand. And when everybody in the team does it over a period of several months, you learn who is the future predictor on your team, who's really good at this. And you don't really have to be great at it to be in product, but you want to keep doing this so that you learn your biases, you learn where you're right and you're wrong. Okay, so I've said a lot of things, we've covered a lot of territory, we've mentioned a lot of concepts. The good news is that technology experiments can be simple and they can be fast, okay? So I'm going to simplify, and what's an easy experimental mentality to adopt? You're in your office, you're at home, in your virtual office, you're thinking about products, latest features, your roadmap. What if you looked at your roadmap and you said, hey, assume you're wrong and hope you might be right. And this works really great when your boss brings you that idea and you say, hey boss, assume you're wrong, but I hope you're right. And your boss will say like, well, I assume you have 6 months of savings because I hope you might be getting another job somewhere else. These are difficult conversations to take things that we all feel certain and push them into uncertainty. But you can be comforted in that the hardcore scientists out there, they do this. They call it the null hypothesis. I have a friend who works for Harvard University doing helping manage the Harvard forest. It's out in the middle of Massachusetts, and they run forest scale experiments. Like how would global warming affect the forest? And she explained to me that their process is to build and brainstorm these experiments, but to, in the end, basically believe that they're not going to work and let the evidence convince them that it worked. So an example of this is in product management, we might say, hey, cats want fish-shaped food. I mean, fish-shaped food is really awesome. I mean, it's so much better than triangle-shaped food. Cats are going to love this. Cats totally love fish. I've seen the cat eat a goldfish. It's fantastic. It's going to work. And we see a little bit of positive evidence and we go with it. And we spend a lot of money and then maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. You know, do we develop that confidence to use our cat food manufacturer to reconfigure everything and spend all that money? Did we really have confidence or was it just hope? If we switch the words, cats have no preference for shapes in food. What this does is it creates a shift in our thinking. and it's going to change how you evaluate the results. Sometimes my teams take these lukewarm responses and they turn them into positive responses. And I'll get to that in a minute. It has to do with their approach. In fact, sometimes they want it to work because they've got engineers who need work on Monday and it's Thursday and they don't have a great backlog. And so developing a deep backlog so that you can have these failures where experiments don't work out is really important. You need that space to be creative and to run these types of experiments. Okay, so why is it so hard to hold both pessimistic and optimistic thoughts at the same time? Well, it's because usually we're sort of one or the other in terms of personality traits. But we also have role models that make this hard. So I'm going to call the role model the Silicon Valley mythology. So as Tom says, it's really great to have folks outside of Silicon Valley in these meetups. It's great cross-pollination. What we don't want to export is some of the megalomania that gets started here that is not necessarily reproducible in your company and for your work. And these folks have created these companies that people use that have been successful. And so we often tie this to, well, I should just act like them. In terms of Steve Jobs, you might have been famous for sort of pushing hard. And if you push hard, that's the way you get stuff done. And there are even people who wear black turtlenecks and blue jeans to kind of copy the look in addition to the attitude. And then, if I consider Amazon and part of Silicon Valley, you've got Jeff Bezos, who I'll have clients, someone in the client inevitably says to me, Jeff Bezos said in his yearly shareholder letter that no customer ever asked me for Prime. And that's probably true. But I can tell you from my experience at fogdog.com that when somebody ordered that treadmill, they would call us an hour later and say, hey, where's the treadmill? I mean, they were expecting their doorbell to ring the same day they ordered a treadmill. And it's a pretty heavy item, right? And it was amazing that consumers had this problem, this need. And it's taken a long time to resolve that. In fact, just in a few cities in America, there's some same-day delivery that Amazon's doing. But even 10 years ago, they had 3-day delivery if you spent more than like $25. And so though no one asked for Prime, the customers, the folks at Amazon certainly knew back in 1999 when I knew that getting shipments there faster and reducing that friction of the time of shipping to getting someone to buy from you was extremely important. And they spent 20 years working on it, and they're going to spend another 20 working on it. So I can tell you that those nobody asked them for Prime, the product managers at Amazon were laser focused on the need and the opportunity. Okay, so problem number 2, there's only 2 big problems here. We're going to go into all the great techniques, is the Big Bang approach. So the Big Bang approach has to do with building a huge experience. Now, the one I've shown you on the screen is only 6 screens long. A lot of my clients will show me something that's like 30 or 40 plus screens long. And it started out as the redesign of some portion of the page, some portion of the site. And someone decided that you couldn't redesign one page because it might have a slightly different look and feel. So you had to redesign everything, and then you wanted to re-platform it if you're redesigning everything, and these types of projects snowball. There's some major downsides to the Big Bang approach, and this is part of what I spend is breaking down the tremendous risk that you take by putting so much time and energy into things you may not know the results of. So product discovery is about tackling these big risks and figuring out how to reduce and get rid of them, if they are able to get rid of them. So we're going to solve these problems and others by using the null hypothesis mentality, which you can just call humility, and these experiment-based techniques. So what do we want to get out of this before I show it to you is, what are the outcomes? When you take this approach, what are you going to get as a company, as an executive, as somebody who's doing product discovery? You're going to get some rapid innovation because you're going to get more perspectives, because discovery is a bottoms-up, team-oriented activity. You're going to explore boundaries because you're going to do more than just fight over one solution and have the highest paid person make a decision. And you're going to fail fast because we're just doing this in the design phase. Though I'm an engineer, I do almost all my work with my clients in the design phase. You're going to identify trade-offs earlier by knowing what's important to users. You can let the users help you to make these hard decisions between your CEO and your legal and your marketing and your sales and your customer support. You're going to have a shorter total project time because when that product goes into engineering, it's not going to come back for rework, whether early QA didn't work or the flow didn't quite make sense. Discovery makes everybody smarter before that product goes into engineering. You get more accurate estimates due to fewer unknowns because you've thought about your product more deeply. And this actually increases morale and long-term productivity as the whole team is involved. And they know why the product is valuable. So they can make decisions on their own when they know why things are valuable. If you give them just the results, they may not be able to make their own decisions. Okay, so here, those are the outcomes. So what can we do to solve our problems and to use an experiment-based approach? Well, I still want to think big. Product folks are basically required to be visionary or at least think big or to work with folks who are thinking big. You don't have to plan everything to be pixel perfect design, but you can have a general vision of where you're going. But I want you to start small. I want you to pick something out of the middle of that experience and let's work on that concept. So when you start small, you're picking out your differentiator, your value. I can tell you your value is really not in the login screen. Your value is somewhere in the middle of that experience, whether you're a business or a consumer. So let's start small. And let's simplify. I like to do one hypothesis per screen. There's a great company that comes up a lot when we do competitive research and product discovery, and it's called Lemonade. Anybody heard of Lemonade? I'm kind of looking at the videos or the chat, but Lemonade is a rental insurance, and they ask you one question per screen rather than a long form. And 26 screens later, you've got a quote for insurance, and you didn't feel like they were extracting teeth. So they've done a great job of simplifying the experience, and they were definitely able to test this one hypothesis per screen. You may combine things in the end, but by having one hypothesis per screen, you're doing one change at a time, you know what users are reacting to. So when you simplify and you pull one screen out, you're able to expand that into multiple solutions. And this is what unlocks the whole team. They start to breathe easier. They're not fighting over things. Now you can't build 7 or 8 solutions maybe, but in design, you should be able to build 3 or 4. And you can definitely test 3 or 4 things with users if you're focused on that value area. And what I like about these types of solutions is that sometimes the winner is the designer, but sometimes it's the data scientist. Sometimes it's the product manager. Sometimes it's the engineer. Different folks come up with the winning designs when I run these product discovery teams. And it's a lot of fun to see those different perspectives. And the team is so much happier to work together. And the product manager also feels a sense of relief when it's not all on their shoulders. Product managers have a lot of stress coming from stakeholders and colleagues and clients. And when they feel they can smartly delegate and approach solutions as a group, it's a lot of fun. Okay, so now we're getting really excited and we're getting some great techniques, and we're going to fall right back into usability, and we're going to be worried about confusing users, and we're going to do testing, and we're going to call it success when they've completed the task. So this is when I say, remember the value. Okay, so people will get through your usability problems if you have tremendous value. And I always think about Craigslist or eBay, even Amazon, where you've got like 10 versions of the same product. You just want that free 2-day shipping. So remember the value. And so the way we construct experiments for value that really zeroes in on it is we assemble these components. And I've got 4 components. There's the actual or representative user. Okay, so this is, again, the user diagram here, user icon. We want these folks to be relevant to the problem or opportunity that your solution's focused on. And we want to select these folks based on their behaviors more than their demographics. A lot of people across demographics do the same activity every day. Well, we can make a lot of money with software and make a lot of happiness by solving that activity, regardless of the demographic. That said, we need to have diverse panels that expose our bias and also help us make a well-rounded product that applies to all of humanity. And in business, when you're doing user testing, you're gathering users, recruiting them, you want to look at the activities more than the role or their job title. So in my screeners, I'm always asking, well, what do you do most? What's your primary activity? We want to get these users. We recruit these actual or representative users. We want to get them in the right mindset. So we're going to use the phrase, think back to a time. Think back to a time when you purchased or upgraded a new computer, within the last 60 days. Please describe that time to me in a couple sentences. If the person can think of that time and they can describe it, they're back in the zone. If they can't think about that time, maybe this person doesn't share the problem that you're trying to address. One of the folks on the call here was talking about upsells in e-commerce. When you're thinking about upsells in e-commerce, you're thinking about the moment in time when the person needs that upsell. If you're just testing with random people that don't need that upsell, it can be hard to get great feedback. And so getting that right mindset is really important. So I'll use this phrase in my screener questionnaire. Have you bought this main product within the last 30 days? And on a site like userinterviews.com, I can get folks like that. And then when I want to talk about an upsell, I can get them into that mindset much more quickly. And I'll end the interview if they can't really get into that mindset. In addition here, we want to avoid the word imagine. This is the most common word I hear user researchers say. Imagine you just bought a cell phone or a computer and you want to get an accessory for it. We are actually inviting people to make things up. Okay, so don't invite people to make things up. And if our users start talking about other people, get them back to themselves. We'll deal with other people by recruiting them. We want to hear about you. Okay, so we want good content. We've got great users, we've got a great mindset. Let's get that great content. A lot of my clients outsource their content to marketing or other folks, content writers. I'll tell you, product managers, get good at writing your own content. Find someone on the team who can write, edit each other's stuff, grab images, what you can, get something rough into discovery, get something rough in front of your clients. You can perfect it later. Your clients, your customers will love to see new ideas and you'll love to get their feedback. Don't let this be a blocker. This can be a big speed blocker. And of course, don't let this be lorem ipsum dolor. Don't put fake content in there. Content is, in some cases like Instagram, 100% of the product. And in other cases, it's a large percentage of the product. It's never a sideshow. Content is extremely important in addition to the features, the technology you're building. So we put this together. We've got the right user, we've got the right mindset, we've got great content. Let's stitch it together into something that looks and feels real. We're going to fake it till we make it. And these days, even someone like me, I can't even use Photoshop and I can make these things. I use Figma and I have a screenshot tool called Snagit. There are a dozen of both of these types of tools. Now, what's a high fidelity prototype? Well, it's something that feels right. It convinces folks long enough to get a good response. So I avoid paper prototypes and I go for these like feels right prototypes with a high fidelity. If you're in like deep platform land, a high fidelity prototype might be a great API documentation that you give to technical developers. It's certainly the only piece of documentation that any developer ever reads is API docs. So if you're building platform tools, you can do something like that. Great, so here's all of them together. This is my components of a product discovery experiment, and they work great. I work with my clients, we put these together, and they're left with a very simple framework to deliver value. So when you put a user through this, what are they going to say? Oh, they'll say things like, oh, I like this. That's interesting. I'd use this. Well, I got news for you, actually. This is a little bit of a trick. These are not good responses. When people say this, what I hear now is I hear, meh. These are actually not wins. People say this, it's like a throwaway phrase to fill the space because they're not used to awkward silence like a user researcher type like me. So they'll just say stuff and that's interesting. I like this. I'd use this. I'd use this almost means the exact opposite. They want to please you. This is a thinking response. So what I'm looking for is a reactive response. So when I put one hypothesis on the screen and it shows up, I don't say anything. I don't say like, what do you see in the screen? I mean, I might say, what would you do on the screen? But I'm just waiting for them to say, ooh, oh, wow. Is this available? And people say this stuff. They say, oh, wow, to business software. I mean, this is like where we're at in this world where software is taken over. People get excited about business software. I mean, people would sort of make fun of me as a computer science major saying, oh, you're going to be in front of a computer all your life. And I said, well, I like computers. That's fine. Well, everyone's in front of computers. And if you can make business users say, oh, wow, you have made their day so much better. So I want you product managers and designers and executives, I want you everybody in the call to seek these responses and to shun the other responses and to not feel like these are good responses, even though on the surface, I've seen people put these on slides and say, oh, user said I like this. So I'm looking for these. When you find these, that's the green check mark. You're feeling good. Okay, so we remembered the value. We focused on our components. We know what we're looking for. There's a lot more to it, obviously, but this was a great start. I want to begin each experiment outside of user experience. Now, what does this have to do with experiments is you become a marketing experimenter. So I want you to find out where, when, and how you will become part of the user's day. This is just a fantastic way to have a great discussion. People don't wake up in the morning, have their cup of coffee, and use your software. They do a lot of things. I mean, maybe you work at Facebook or Instagram or one of these sort of really addictive sites where people are constantly refreshing and doom scrolling and whatnot. Most of us have software that people need to enter and be provoked or promoted to enter. So let's start users in Slack. Well, maybe we'll start them in Teams. Again, these are screenshots. I blur a bunch of stuff out, and then we put the link in that we want. Well, start them in Gmail. I took my Gmail inbox, blurred it, put a fake subject line in there. I'm getting people warmed up into the testing experience. It doesn't have to be super real here. And it's something I've seen again and again, people do fine in these types of entrances. And they actually makes the experiment much better. Text message, push notifications. This is a great way to, would the person dismiss this or would they actually enter it? In this particular instance, we were testing links in text messages from computers, not from a person. People don't like those. So my client went a different direction for this one. So let's begin outside of your experience. I might have a team, have my client fake up like a Facebook ad as the first screen of a prototype or a Google results page. And the most fun is when you want to see how someone will Google a particular term and you have to start the experiment and do think back to a time when and not mention the word. It's like apples to apples. So that's always one of my fun things to do is to try to get someone in the zone without saying any words that are really close to it. So great, we've got our simplified screen. We're starting outside of our experience. This is what our prototype looks like. Very different than what most people are doing. So what's missing? You show this to your boss and your boss is like, or your colleagues are like, hey, where's the login? Where's the security requirements, two-factor authentication? Where's the logo's not in the right place? I mean, where's the logo? Where's my escape hatch, the info button, the bento box, the kebab, the meatballs, the hamburger menu, give your favorite food group an icon. I recommend to my clients, don't value test very common interactions. This is why your designers are professional. They know this stuff. You can read about this on the internet. You can watch videos on this type of stuff. Pick the best login you have and go with it. Upsells in e-commerce. There's a lot of great sites that do it really well. Find them, reverse engineer and improve those. Find that value moment and really focus in on that. Okay, so here we're going to add choose your own adventure options. And I'll put on the screen, this is the cover of a book. This is the first choose your own adventure book made a long time ago. I actually bought this book. And at the bottom of this page, you'll notice that you can actually choose which way you want to go. Turn to that page, and then you may die or you may survive in the end after doing this 5 or 6 or 7 times. And it's a lot of fun. As a reader, you get to make your own book, and then you kind of read through and you make your own book again. I love this as a kid. I probably read like 20 of those books. So I'm super happy to have one back in the house. So how can we get users in our experiments to choose their own adventure? Okay, so again, hey, here's that red pill, blue pill. Let's make some really obvious calls to action. For the designers out there, you're getting really offended by my designs now. I've made the favorite thing smaller, and I put these like weird buttons there. Well, hold on, it's gonna get worse. Maybe they want to chat it, maybe they want to print it, maybe they want to download it. We want that kebab menu. We're going to spend an hour discussing whether it's a kebab, a meatball, a bento box, a hamburger menu, an info icon. I mean, you're killing me, right? It's just the amount of times I've talked to clients about this. You know what users do? They figure it out. Doesn't matter what you put there. They'll find the crazy menu icon that you have invented. I hate the hamburger menu like a passion, but I see every user find it no problem. So rest assured, if you've got the option, they'll figure it out. And I think we do want to reduce the friction and make people happy, but we don't want to obsess over things that people don't have problems with. When you choose your own adventure, when you provide a user interface like this in an experimental way, you're letting the data scientist put a call to action in there, the product manager, the engineer, the customer support person, the QA person. Let's put a bunch of calls to action up there. You're not going to build a user experience like this, but you should definitely build an experiment like this. And you want to make these obvious. The worst thing you can do in an experiment is, oh, would you have clicked on that button? It makes the hair on my arm stand up. Okay, so make it obvious. It's not going to kill you. And as it turns out, it's a little bit easier to make these types of designs than make them pixel perfect. So provide those choose your own adventure calls to action and let your customer help you innovate what to do next with this great information that you provided them. Okay, so what happens when my teams get to this point? They immediately want to keep building. Oh, what if they click the blue button or the red button or the chat? Let's build all these screens. Hey, slow down. Build only what you need to answer your hypothesis. If you come in with a strong hypothesis, this is going to help you do less work. You can build out the choose your own adventure pages for that blue button they clicked next time. Or you just ask them like, well, what'd you expect to be there? Or what were you doing clicking the blue button? Everyone had bets on the red button and the blue button was thrown in by the intern. This happens, right? Listen to the intern, okay? And if you allow bad design and lots of choose your own adventure options, your intern might win and give you the next aha, ooh, oh wow moment, okay? Don't let the ugly get in the way of awesome experiments. Okay, so we've made this totally offensive thing to designers that's totally fantastic for getting great ideas out of your users. And we're gonna do something even worse. And I learned this by accident, is we're gonna leave something vague. And when I'm done with the prototype and I feel like we've been too thorough, I'll often ask the team to remove something. So here's a graph, it's revenue, December, January. Looks like December, we underperformed the average. In January, we overperformed the average. Well, we did a prototype and we had 2 teams and we only had 1 designer. And so one of the teams had the data scientist offered to be the designer. So this person learned Figma during the time we were doing this sprint. And they did this graphic, but they didn't put on the label that we had sort of drawn in our sketches. So we showed this to users and we realized partway through showing, we're like, okay, well, let's not fix it. Let's just see what they say. And so I asked them, well, what do you think that line is for? Oh, that's my custom target that I wanted to get to. Clearly I missed my target in this month, but I made it in that month. And the majority of users called it their custom target that they had entered in before. I mean, this is a piece of software they've never seen, an experience they've never had. They know this company really well. And so we were able to elicit their inner thoughts with this kind of Rorschach approach. This is great. And so leave something vague and let your users fill in the blanks. And they went through their analytics packages and they provided, instead of an average, a benchmark, which they thought was the more analytically correct thing to do. People love benchmarks. People thought of their own companies as so individual that the benchmarks didn't apply to their scenario. What they wanted was the ability to just put in the number so they could see their progress. And maybe you could, when they put in their number, you could text them when they get close to it or they surpass it. So it opens up a lot of really great user-centric features. So it's a huge win, totally by accident. Okay, so there's one more thing here, because we do like to copy this, people that are famous. So one more thing, back to that null hypothesis. You need to allow your users to do nothing. And this is the most painful part, because we all love our software, we love our ideas. I'm often working with founders on their baby. And I'm having them to restrain themselves, go on mute during these user interviews to do nothing, to allow the users to do nothing. And it could be the option they want to do is just go have a cup of coffee. They're kind of done. They're not that interested in continuing in the software. This is a really important reaction. So the non-reaction is also an important reaction. So the do nothing response is a very powerful reminder to everybody, like, hey, people are busy. They don't necessarily care about your software. And it's up to us to make sure that we're doing something that's worthwhile for them. So we want to think big and start small. We want to do one hypothesis per screen so we can really get a great read on the person's reaction. We want to expand to multiple solutions. Bring the innovation now. Let's fail fast in design. We want to remember the value so we don't get lost in the trees. Keep the forest really in focus. We want to begin the experiment outside of the experiment so we can know when, where, and how the person's going to get into our experience. We don't want to value test our common interactions. You can hallway test with your colleagues some of these things. We want to add these choose your own adventure calls to action so we don't miss what users might want to do. And we don't want to overtalk or bias them in what they could do. We want to build only what you have to answer your hypothesis. Do as little work as possible. Be lazy here, capital L, lazy. I have my video's mirrored. Leave something vague for that serendipity. And of course, allow users to do nothing because maybe they don't want to, maybe they're not interested in your product. That's okay. It's not you, it's the product. It's not you, it's them. So in recap, here is what I would do instead of that really big bang type user experience that went from a 2-week project into a 6-month project. This became a really creative, very targeted brainstorming, really meant to bring out the inner thoughts of our users and to capture those needs rather than just listen to their wants. So I hope you make experiments like this. I think back to the team that built this, who did all this hard work for this amazing product that didn't quite hit the market right. If they'd had these techniques, they could have hit the market much sooner. And so by using this experimental mentality, you can do less work, learn more, and do it in a faster time frame. So that's my goal for everybody. And you'll do a discovery more often and you'll just be happier and you'll be mediating arguments with real customer feedback. And so when I think about this pyramid here, we've got our experiments down at the bottom, ideation, discovery, validation. You're making better decisions. You're having better collaboration. You can do all of this on Zoom. I've done 2/3 of this work the last 5 years over Zoom. You get to product market fit faster. You're going to develop confidence. You should develop some empowerment for your team. And then really you get that rapid innovation. So this is my goal for everybody. If you have a prototype that you're wondering about what it is, you can jot this down, pdgp.io/prototype. There's someone that I love in behavioral science named BJ Fogg. He's a Stanford researcher. He gives 15 minutes of free time to talk about any idea you want to talk about with behavioral research. I've taken advantage of it a couple times. He's very insightful. He's amazing, super nice. And so this is one of my ways to give back and make 2021 really awesome. It's pretty quick for me to figure out like how you want to test things and to turn your prototype into more of an experience, experiment more than an experience. you'll figure out how to make a great experience. I can help you figure out how to make it a great experiment. With that, I'll take questions. You can type any blockers about product discovery in the chat, and then I'd love for you to take the survey. The only way I can get better at explaining what I do and helping other people is through feedback from folks. So that's a 4-question survey. Only the first question is required. So I would love to see that up there. So yeah, thank you. Oh yeah, BJ Fogg rules. Matt Klein knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, he's got a great book out this year too. So he's really hitting his stride. Tiny Habits is a great book.
Excellent. I see we've got a few questions coming in from the audience. I know Jim has his hand up. Jim Shibler, one of our members. Would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Thanks for the talk. You talked about going straight into high fidelity prototypes, and yet in the conclusion you were saying invest the minimum, be lazy, etc. I would expect to do some low fidelity prototypes in a first round just to get the minimum information with the minimum amount of effort, or maximum information with minimum effort. And then when you start to get the scent of something that looks like it's going to go somewhere, then I'd invest in a higher fidelity prototype. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that can work. You as a product manager should know, we'll get to know your users and whether you're getting honest responses, right? If the users can't see through the balsamic and it looks kind of like a plaything to them, then you know you've got to up the level. For me, I go straight to high fidelity because I'm not a designer. So I just screenshot things and I kind of just cut them out and I move them around. And then I use some text to match. And so I tend to fall right into high fidelity because I'm just copying material and just repurposing little bits of it most of the time. So for me, high fidelity tends to be easier than starting from scratch. And I don't love the way Balsamic does it because I don't think people get enough into the experience. But low fidelity, yeah, I mean, it definitely can work. I don't want to say that this is the only way to do it. It's just definitely my preferred way. But yeah.
So it sounds like the key is to be able to get the person you're interviewing to kind of suspend their disbelief that they're in a prototype and actually wrap their head around it. And it isn't so much kind of a style or design so much as getting them in that right mindset.
Yeah, you can give a sales presentation. Sometimes that's kind of a prototype. But yeah, and I never use the word prototype. I forgot to mention that. I should write that down. But I always say concept. Oh yeah, and parts of this concept might be broken. Oh yeah, that's not working. I don't want to say, they don't really know what the word prototype is anyways, but I don't want to pull them out of the mode. People know there are websites and apps that are broken. It's amazing. Like, oh yeah, it's broken. Or they'll say, well, what am I doing here? Or what's your company? I say, do you mind if I tell you at the end? You know, keep them out of trying to figure out what's going on and into that zone.
We got another question came in from the internet side. Somebody was asking, especially relevant in 2020, and you know, for at least the next 6 months or so here. When you are interviewing users, you know, in the past you could say, well, we're going to invite everybody to lunch and, you know, get them in a conference room and, you know, get some pizza and, you know, do a presentation and get their feedback. What have you found differently and what have you found effective in kind of the Zoom world that we find ourselves in and doing this virtually? Have you found it better doing one-on-one? Or are you getting groups together? What's the dynamic in that?
Sure. I'll say I have a very strong preference for one-on-one. I haven't done a focus group in 5 years. And so part of what I like to do with my clients is to get these interviews down from 45 to 60 minutes down to 15 to 30. And the way I do that is I don't ask them a lot about themselves. I love my users. I love people, but I don't necessarily care like who you are. You know, I care what your behavior is, what your need is. And as we talk about the product, all of who you are that's relevant to that behavior that we're testing is going to come out during that test. So I do about 60 seconds of chit chat. I do almost nothing. It shocks everybody who gets in the interviews with me. And I love people. It's also a more discreet way to run these interviews. I don't need to know about your whole life. And I don't think you should have to explain that to me. I do want to know everything about choosing a home professional or buying an accessory or doing this particular thing. That's what I'm paying you to do, is to tell me all about that. Do I need to know like what your job is? I don't know. I do make sure that I don't like to unemployed or retired or students unless it's hyper relevant to the product. So I do screen some folks out on that kind of stuff, but no, over Zoom, they get on, we talk, if the other person's not on, I might ask them a question, but you know, I also don't want to get involved in politics or what's going on in the world today. You know, it's their business, you know, and I don't want to put them in an uncomfortable situation. I don't want to assume they think the same things that I think. And so I really dispense with the chit chat. We go right into the user study, think back to a time. I'm laser focused to make sure that this is the right user. So we're really thinking back to that moment. But no, in Zoom, like I said, 2/3 of my time this last 5 years has been remote, and Zoom's been around. I've been a Zoom user for Zoom subscription person for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, but yeah. That's going to be controversial out there. I know there are lots of people who like it. And there's generative research. There's a place for generative research where you do get to know people. I'm not saying it doesn't have a place, but I love asset-based testing because I can get that reaction response, not the thinking response.
Right. So if anybody has questions, feel free to type them in the chat window and let me know whether you'd like me to call on you. I can certainly do that. I've got one other question that came in from somebody, and kind of a new product manager. One of the things they're struggling with is recruiting for the experiments, because they came out of an engineering background, and the salespeople apparently don't hang out with the engineers very often, and so they're trying to figure out how do they go about standing up a product discovery exercise and getting the recruiting part, even if somebody said, yeah, go ahead, run the experiments, you know, just getting started on that front. Who do they plug into? Do you have any good tricks for finding those perfect customers to chat with?
Yeah. One thing I love is moderated user interviews. That means I'm there live with you. You can do unmoderated, which is that set it, forget it with usertesting.com is the most famous for this. One of the issues is it's really hard to make value-driven experiments in a set it and forget it unmoderated atmosphere. It's a little bit easier to do usability experiments. And there are a lot of professional testers on usertesting.com. A lesser known company is called userinterviews.com. And I've used them to find CFOs, engineers for API research, energy professionals, people who have just remodeled their house. And when I ask them, have you done a user test before? They're telling me like 1 or 2 tests. And that's what I love. Right. So they do a lot of recruiting. I don't know if it's good for their business or bad for their business, but their panel's pretty big. And so it's not oversubscribed. So I love them. And I'm paying between $25 and $75 a user. Usually like $1 a minute's a decent way to do it. I can usually stretch people from 30 to 40 minutes, you know, for free. So I like that. I like pulling customer lists. If I get a data analyst on the team, I'll tell them at the beginning of the week, look, I'm looking for this type of criteria. Can you pull me 3,000 names? And then I use, on the Mac, I use something called Mixmax. It'll send a merge mail. And then on Windows, you can use Yesware. It'll do a merge mail. You want to say, hello, Jim, you know, make it personal. And you want to make the emails really simple and text oriented. And so existing users are great. User interviews is great. I've worked with a government client, a government contractor who only has a couple clients, and you have to get a couple of users and you have to go to a certain physical location. So recruiting is hard, but you can do it. I've worked with clients who are not allowed to talk to their own customers. So you have to find these proxy customers. Have you bought this recently? Maybe not from me. So sometimes your sales and marketing team won't allow you to talk to your own prospects. So that's a long answer because recruiting is hard. I start the recruiting on the first day of my engagement so that by the time we get to user testing, they're ready. And you want to engage like an office assistant, an administrative assistant, somebody who might be interested in helping you schedule and do logistics.
Excellent, excellent. I think that's good advice. That is one of the hardest hurdles to get over. So I'll leave the chat window open a little bit longer in case anybody has any last minute questions. And I can circle back to that. But in the meantime, while we're seeing if anybody's typing slowly, I'd like to thank Jim for coming and speaking with us. I think this is a highly informative topic and something that many of us are engaged with at one level or another or struggling with. I do want to mention again and remind folks that this presentation will be online within 2 weeks at svpma.org and our YouTube site. And don't forget about the workshop that's coming up at the end of the month on Zoom and virtual presentations and meetings. And then lastly, a little bit of a preview, next month's meeting. We're planning to bring in a couple of experts in public relations and PR. As product managers, we've all sort of dreamed of the Steve Jobs moment, and you come out on stage and there's wild applause and you unveil this product and one more thing. Or some of us have been scheduled for that sort of thing, have woken up in a cold sweat and wondered if we were going to be in the middle of a blue screen of death or throwing a baseball through a supposedly bulletproof window and having it break through the other side. And how do you manage these on stage and on television and being interviewed by the press? These are all typical things that we haven't really gotten a great deal of expertise with. And suddenly on our product launch, somebody knocks on our door and say, hey, we've got a TV crew. Can you come down with the VP of sales, and they want to give a quick blurb to somebody. And if you haven't thought through this process before, it's fascinating. I've been through it a number of times, and I definitely recommend that PMs at least get an insight into what that's like. If you've ever dreamed of being rich and famous, or at least having a famous product, please check in with us. We'll have the details for that meeting up within the next week or two on svpma.org. And with that, I don't see any further questions. So once again, thanks to Jim Morris. Again, if you have any colleagues who unfortunately missed this or signed up and couldn't make it, please pass along that this will be available on the SVPMA website. And we hope this was useful. I'm always available for feedback. If you have any feedbacks or ideas for further meetings, feel free to email the board at svpma.org, or myself, Tom, at svpma.org. And we will pass your feedback along, as well as take your ideas. So thanks very much, and we hope to see you at the workshop or in next month's meeting. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you next end of the month or next month.